Let's talk a little bit about Marathon today, specifically around the web UI to do stuff. We'll talk kind of more broadly about what Marathon is and how it works, but let's also take a close look at the portal and see how we can use the web UI to do our work. Let's talk a little bit about what Marathon is. So Marathon is a production-proven Apache Maysles framework for orchestrating containers. And the easiest way to use it is the way we're going to use it inside of DCOS. It essentially controls applications. It has a REST API that allows us to start, stop, and scale applications. Now it can do either containerized or non-containerized applications. Let's keep the discussion about what Marathon exactly is. Well, one of the things to notice, it is written in Scala, the programming language Scala. So that is kind of a functional language, has some object-oriented features as well. Marathon can run in highly available mode, meaning that it can run multiple copies. It has kind of a leader election algorithm to kind of determine which of the Marathon processes is the leader. And so essentially it allows you to control, fine-grained control about how your applications get deployed. Do you want it per rack, per node, etc.? It gives you that type of control. Couple more slides here on what exactly Marathon is. It can be thought of as a meta framework, meaning that you can start other frameworks from within Marathon, such as Kronos or Storm. And again, all of these type of frameworks are about resiliency, keeping the machines alive. So you can launch pretty much anything here that you could launch in a standard shell, not just containers as we talked about previously. In fact, you could even start other Marathon instances within Marathon itself. Continuing our discussion, Maysles plays a crucial role here with Marathon. It is closely aligned in terms of it providing that kind of giant resource of compute, abstracting away individual machines and kind of thinking of it as one elastic pool of fault-tolerant computers. And so Marathon helps solve the discovery problem, because you have a bunch of services running across a bunch of computers in a Maysles cluster, and you want them to be easily discoverable and addressable via the URLs. And so these endpoints, which you want to expose to the outside world, is one of the things that Marathon helps you manage. Okay, so once again, Marathon assists with the notion of a health check. It can actually do probes and make sure that the applications at these endpoints are up and running, and then stores that state persistently. HA Proxy, it's an open source load balancer that Marathon supports, and it's basically a way to route traffic evenly or according to some algorithm across a bunch of application servers. So again, it's all about performance and reliability in a highly replicated environment with many duplicate services, and shedding that load across all these in an intelligent way is the way Marathon leverages HA Proxy to achieve that. This next section is all about setting up a tunnel. We have a machine that has a browser, whether that's Windows, Mac, or Linux, and we want to set up a tunnel so we can go and execute a browser against the cluster. This post you see here helps you achieve that. So it's about generating this PPK file, which is what PuttyGen will do. This is what's going to be used inside of Putty later. We need that PPK file. Here you see Putty. Notice I've saved a session already, DCOS tunnel. Let's walk through it. I've got the URL of my master node of the DCOS cluster, port 2200. And if I scroll down a little bit here, you'll notice I have a section here on the left tree for SSH. So let's go ahead now and kind of go over there. We've already taken a look at this host name. It's the master node of our DCOS cluster. There's a couple sections to pay attention to here in the SSH section. One of them is going to be the PPK file that you saw here. And again, PuttyGen makes that file. We just have to load it here into Putty. Outside of that, we need to identify a port that we're going to map in through. So when we say localhost 8081, for example, we need to set that up here in Putty. So let's go down a little bit to the tunnel section to take a look at that. So if we scroll down here, down past X11, here's the tunnels. Notice that my source port is 8081 and the destination is localhost 80. That means that if I do localhost from my browser 80:8081, it's going to hit port 80 on the DCOS master node. So again, we're just talking about setting up this tunnel so we can use a browser and therefore load Marathon. That's what this section is really about. So again, we want to tunnel in. I just kind of talked about what's involved here. And you need to set up this tunnel if you're going to go ahead and do localhost 8081, which then will hit the master node of our DCOS cluster. Now that I've got that set up, notice I'm going to go to localhost 8081/Marathon. That's what's going to basically get us to the GUI for Marathon against our DCOS cluster. And so that was the whole point of all that tunneling work. So let's go ahead now and create an application. Again, we want to demonstrate Marathon in action from the GUI. And let's say for argument's sake, we want to run Nginx at scale. We want to do this not on the command line, but through the Marathon GUI here. So here you can see I give it an ID, I specify how much memory I want, disk space, and so on. We go down here to the Docker container section, and this will pull the official Nginx image down from the Docker Hub. We want bridged networking for this Docker container. And we're going to go over here to ports, and we're going to map basically the ports appropriately. Port 80, and we'll just give it a name of port 80. But there's some tricks here, there's some nuances that we need to worry about. We need to go in here and change the host port to be 0. Just to reemphasize, not port 80. So make sure that says host port 0 so that it'll scale appropriately. So once again, we've filled out our ports both in the GUI and both in terms of JSON. For health checks, we'll just put a / in this section. And there's only one final area that we're going to play with, and this is the optional area you see here below. Let's go ahead and put slave public for accepted resource roles here. So go ahead and just type that in. That says slave public. Once we filled out the new application configuration items, we're going to go ahead and just click on Create Application, at which point the system will go down to the hub.docker.com, download the Nginx image, and run it as a container in our cluster. Now remember, I did say host port 0 is the edit we made so that we could scale this. So perhaps the next thing we had to do is double-click here on the application, and let's go ahead and start playing around with scaling this. And that's a simple case of just entering a number here, automatically scaling it to 2 through the user interface. So let's go back to localhost 8081 here, go back on the dashboard, and just show you here that it's running here inside of the dashboard. Notice here under Services Health, the Nginx component looks healthy here in the lower right, right there on the upper right now. Go ahead and click on that, and notice there's a scale button there that we can tap into to increase the number of running instances. Now we have some constraints here because we have only so many nodes that we can scale into, but if you have at least 2 nodes here, we can scale to 2. There's other tricks you can play if you needed to bump that number up, but let's keep it straightforward here. So let's go back over here to Marathon and click the scale over there. You can do it in more than one spot. Let's do it in Marathon because that's what this demo is about. So we're going to go over here now and click into Nginx and go find the scale button here, scale application, and go ahead up arrow, enter a 2 over here, and click scale the application. So it'll take a few moments to get this done, maybe 4 or 5 minutes. And then what we ought to see here in the list below is 2 instances of Nginx, and there you see it, both of them healthy now. So clearly we want the Marathon infrastructure load balance across these 2. So this was a successful demonstration of Marathon. We deployed an application and scaled it. And we showed you how to all do this from a UI. Now remember, there's other videos where I show you this, how to take a more API-centric approach. So that's it for now. So just to sum up, we showed you and talked about how Marathon works. We showed you how to set up a tunnel, use the GUI to go navigate to Marathon, and then how to use the GUI to deploy applications and scale them, all through basic mouse point-and-click operations. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more videos in this area.